Stacy's got the right idea.
Oh.
That sounds a little bit much, though. There we go. Much better. Are you muted now?
I'll let you do the housekeeping slides. Sandy, you get that pleasure.
All right. Is everybody here? Are we ready to start? I'm going to say yes. It's 6:01. So if you're not here, you probably remember this. The housekeeping slide that I get to do, please remember to keep your mic muted unless you're speaking. And please raise your hand if you have the availability to do that. It's up on the top bar on most places, or at the bottom bar under reactions, where you can raise your hand. And I'll call on people in the order that they raise their hand. You can leave your camera on or off. If you're not wearing pants, please leave your camera off. Please know the meeting's being recorded. That's a fact. One other quick thing while we're on here is we have a really busy agenda, and it is a beautiful night. So I'm going to kind of move us through. I want everybody to have a chance to speak, but let's be really thoughtful so we're not doing a lot of storytelling and stuff, because we have really important stuff to cover. What I'd like is for CAG members, so community members in the CAG members, to be able to ask questions first. And then if there's time, we'll let anybody else that's visiting member kind of ask some questions. I think there was going to be some legislative people that were tuning in. So if they're here, we'll give you a chance to talk as well at the end. So is that what you needed me to do, Abby? Nope.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. We'll let Kelly do roll call.
Brad.
Present.
Charlie.
Here. Here.
Christina. Don't see her name on the side. Connie.
Here.
Daniel Brown. Daniel Burlingame. David Norwood. Dave Wynn.
I'm here.
Elizabeth. Gail said she wasn't coming. Gail Dugan. Jeffrey Dutton. Jeremy Welsh. Joe.
Don't see him.
Justin. Ken Harvey. Laura Ogar. Leah. Lynn McIntosh. Margaret. Mary Blanchard.
Here.
Matt. Pam McQueer. Patty Baldwin.
Here.
Rick Burns.
Here.
Whoops. Oh, shit. Rick Radisky.
Here.
Bob Pataki. Andy,
I'm here.
Shalene, Stacy Taylor,
Here.
Teresa, see Teresa,
I thought I saw her come in, but I don't.
Tony,
Here.
Tyler,
Good evening here.
Bill Barnett,
Yep. He's here.
Bill Creel,
Here.
And then go
Alright.
back up and
Shalene is
mark.
here.
Yeah, Shalene Thurston is here. Shelley Thurston's here. So
Thanks.
okay, very good.
Righty, thank you. All right, so let's just dive in with subcommittee reports if we can. Let's start with, I guess, the engaging the public subcommittee. Rick, I think that's yours.
Yeah, we had a meeting right before this one, and we decided to do some case studies. So we're interested in looking at some of the recent MPART sites and seeing how the public was engaged on them. We picked the Newaygo County Eagle Ottawa Leather site, and that just showed up on the MPART list a couple weeks ago, and it's a Biosolids site. There's actually 3 sites within that site, and it covers 3 different counties. And we're interested in setting up a meeting with Aaron Asman and Kelly and whoever else wants to attend. But just talk about how the public was engaged on that particular site, because there are groundwater wells in each one of those locations. One of the particular site wells was over 1,000 parts per trillion, so it's a pretty significant site. And we'd like to learn more about how much time it takes, how many person hours it takes, and just what the process was from the first sample result that showed high levels at that particular site to going out and engaging the public. So we'd like to do a couple of case studies just to see how the process occurs, and we're going to look at our little spreadsheet, and we wanted notifications to come out, and that this was done before we had a discussion on the spreadsheet. But I think we're interested in learning. We can have a lot of thoughts on how the process should occur, but I think nothing is better than to look at how it's being implemented on the ground. And I'm sure it's not as it's more difficult than what we think it is. So we want to have a couple case studies, and we'll do maybe one a month, and then report back to the COG what the process was. And we're kind of picking this one first, but we might want to go to others that are more complex and have different receptor points. But this is kind of the strategy we want to, or the topics that we want to move forward on, is to look at some case studies and learn from them, and just go from there. So that's what we discussed.
Great, thanks, Rick.
Sure.
Any questions or anything? That kind of bleeds into the public notification thing that we'll get into later too. So maybe we'll save questions for that. All right, website review committee.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. This is Bill Creel. We've been working our way through the different parts of the website. We took a look at the firefighting foam part last time. Overall, it looked like a good write-up to us, and we had a few minor comments. But we do think the preventative measures subcommittee should review a little part of that write-up. And I think Kelly's going to put it up there because, the MPART identified some gaps with the foam issues. And we think that those gaps should be, maybe the subcommittee's already looking at them, but right here under what we know and don't know about fluorine, and we did identify the typo, fluorine-free AFFF. But there are some comments here that the preventative group should take a look at, we think. So that's our recommendation there. And for the next review, the new website is going to go live on April 22nd. So that's our subcommittee is going to take a look at the new website and see if we have any overall comments on it for the next meeting. That's it.
Thank you. Do you want to shoot Dave an email or something so there's some specifics that group can look at? Or I think that group's meeting Thursday night or something, right, Dave?
Yep, it's Thursday night.
All right. And
Kelly, can you just send him the page it's on?
Yep, will do.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your work on that. Dave, what you got on preventative measures?
Preventative measures. We had a meeting with after our COG meeting last month. Then we met with a lady from the Ecology Center, Rebecca, and Rebecca was able to provide us a lot of information on preventative measures and things that they're already working on. So there is a lot of documentation and information available that they're willing to share with the group and also with the communities. We have a meeting coming up this Thursday that I'd like to, talk a little bit, and I'm going to be sending out an agenda. But one other thing I wanted to mention was Mary Blanchard had a general community meeting, I think about a week ago, in her area in Holly, and she was able to present, actually pass out a lot of that information. And from what I understand, it was very helpful. And that's the type of information that we need to get out to the communities. One question I do have was based on the our last COG meeting. Abby, we had mentioned to MPART about possibly having a tab on the MPART website. And I was wondering if you was able to give that any thought and have any more thoughts on that.
Yeah, we've talked about it briefly. I think we might be able to have like a link to another website, but I don't know how easy it's going to be to directly put stuff on. Matter of fact, I hate to say this, but it sounds like from the new web page structure that we're going to get, that it's going to be even harder for us to make updates. So, so I'm going to wait and see. But if we have a hosting spot that's probably outside of the state, maybe we can link to that to do updates that way or something along those lines.
Anything that you guys can do, that would be great. Because like I said, Mary was actually nice enough to present a lot of that information. And from what I understand, she was able to get a lot of good feedback from the community there in Holly based on some of that information. So on Thursday, we're going to talk a little bit more about it. And I would hope that based off our next month meeting, we'll have a lot of more information to be able to share with the group.
Good. Yeah, I know she did get some pamphlets from DHHS, and so I'm hoping that that's what she was able to use. Good. I'm
Community
glad.
awareness.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Right, thanks, Dave. And I guess if anyone has a 10-year-old niece or nephew at home that could help MPART with website management, please donate their time quickly. All right, membership committee. Mary, are you here?
I am here.
All right, what you got?
As far as membership, we did not have anything this month, but at the end of the meeting, I was suggesting that possibly we could do some brainstorming if there's time on how to attract new members from the existing sites that are not represented in the COG, and also to try to engage as new communities come on. And Abby and Kelly have shared with me some of the steps that MPART already has built into the system. So hopefully we can work on that. And if anybody has ideas, either at the end of the meeting, or feel free to send me or Daniel or Joe any ideas you have on how to attract new members. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think that's it for subcommittees. Are there any questions or comments or ideas for any of the subcommittees that we need to hear about? All right, I'm guessing not. All right, so let's dive back into the public notification issue. Abby, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about this and then open it up for more discussion and brainstorming. And you're on mute. It wouldn't be a Zoom meeting if you're not on mute.
Yes, it wouldn't be a meeting if we didn't start out on mute. All right, thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I do have some things to say, and I've put together a little display that I'm hoping to share with you guys here in a second. But I really want to just take a step back for a minute. We've got new members here who may not have been in the last year's worth of meetings, or for some of you have been here for 2 years, 3 years. And so let me just take a minute to step back. So, you know, since the beginning of MPART, we've really had to work to be very flexibly strategic. And this is going to be my new catchphrase, flexibly strategic, because we've created approaches using sometimes limited data, limited science to be able to map out what we're calling a holistic approach to gather PFAS data and understanding for our state. This was never easy. Since 2017, when we just had data at that point for Wurtsmith, we just had data for Wolverine. MPART was originally formed and really had no regulatory authority. We've worked with the data we had, we've worked with the science, we've worked with the dedication of you guys as the citizens and our staff to get a lot of good work done. And because we've gotten so much done, because of the efforts of citizens to raise awareness of PFAS and public health issues, we've come to where we are today. We now have 208 MPART sites. We've got probably another 15 to 20 in line to become MPART sites, but our goals have stayed the same, right? Our goals is number one, protection of public health, protection of our environment, education of our public around PFAS issues, and you guys as the COG, in your participation, your passion, continue to be a testament to those shared goals and to the continued dedication of protecting our citizens from all of the PFAS contamination. We've discussed the COG public notification recommendations for the past year, and those have been very productive discussions, but I've heard very loud and clear that the priority of notifying the public for PFAS investigations is data is the utmost importance, the number one thing that we've heard. This importance is given, I think, because of that overall goal for the protection of public health. As our old saying goes, knowledge is power, and to give residents information on PFAS is to give them that power, is to help them better protect themselves and their families against PFAS. MPART shares that goal. We hear you, we totally agree that protection of public health needs to be number one. And so we all appreciate the time and effort and conversations, because I think they've been fruitful. We've gone in and done a lot of discussions on public notifications. But I've also heard very clearly from you guys in the last couple of meetings that you want a response from us. You want a response on MPART's ability to implement and to that recommendation that you've given us. So we're going to continue And one of the things I want to point out in what I'm going to discuss here in a second is we continue to try to be flexibly strategic in as many ways as we can, with resources, with staff times, with funding, to do this enormous task of strategic PFAS approach for Michigan. That being said, you know, MPART, our staffing, our resources are limited. So we're doing the highest priority work to make sure we protect public health with all the available resources we have. So I'm going to walk through an outline of the response that we've been implementing so that you guys can understand it. But one of the things before I start that, I do want to say, because this is going to come up and you guys are going to wonder about this, is we have right now, there is about $2 billion that's going to come into Eagle's budget, just Eagle's. That's huge. It's the biggest budget we've ever had in the state of Michigan for one department, or for at least for our department for Eagle. But none of that money goes to PFAS investigations. None of it goes to PFAS staffing. It doesn't go to the kinds of things that we would need to help further the PFAS investigation. What it does go to, and believe me, I'm not complaining, what it does go to is infrastructure for public works, like helping our communities that are most affected by PFAS. So it does go to, you know, the Pelstons and the Wexfords and the, you know, the big and little communities that will need grant dollars in order to rectify the situations for PFAS. So that $2 billion will get put into all kinds of high priority PFAS and non-PFAS funding issues that will come up in the next, you know, few years, because it's going to take a while to go through $2 billion worth of grant funding. But that being said, I just want you guys to know that when you hear about Eagle's enormous budget, there was no money in there, at least in that phase of it, for PFAS investigations or for staffing. Just know that piece. So what I'm going to walk through, and Kelly has stopped sharing, so let me share my screen. Hopefully you guys can all see this. So this is a outline of what I'm calling our public engagement response matrix type of thing. What this will do, and one of the other things I've heard from you guys is we don't want another East Bay Township to happen. We don't want there to be a huge delay before the public is notified because of that knowledge is power, because of wanting to have that everybody to be able to make those own decisions. So we've taken a little bit slightly different approach, and we've talked about this before, but I think what we are able to do using the available resources and the available staff is do this residential precautionary well sampling. And so in the cases where you have an East Bay, where you have a potential significant source, like an airport, where you don't have any data, but you do have drinking water wells that exist in an area that could be at risk based on groundwater flow direction or geology or something else that you're looking at, then we will do notification to local health, local officials, and we will start reaching out to those residents that are most at risk, the ones with the shallow wells, the ones that are on drinking water wells, the ones that are down gradient. And we will implement, before any data is actually collected, we'll implement that precautionary residential well sampling protocol. And so that's been done at quite a few sites, not just airports, but we've been implementing that for quite a few of our sites where it looks like we may have drinking water wells at risk. That's not quite the same thing as what you guys were asking for as full-scale notification, but it is something that we can do, and we think it's something that covers that goal of public notification as well as protection of public health. In addition to that, we continue to follow our regular communication protocol with the outreach to the websites, the webinars, all the other stuff that we do as MPART. We also then follow Eagle's 201 regulations, and for every MPART site or site where we start to sample drinking water wells, DHHS comes up with what we call a site-specific public health action plan. And that action plan, again, lays out, okay, if this house has an exceedance, this is what we'll do. We'll give them a filter. We'll continue to sample them. We will continue to step out if we find more wells. So those pieces are all going on while we are doing this, pretty preliminary assessment of drinking water wells. Obviously, as the scenario gets worse, as the contamination is more confirmed, as the res wells are more impacted, that's when we go into much more extensive outreach for making sure there's a town hall, making sure that it's on the MPART site because it becomes an actual MPART site, or it fits the criteria of an MPART site. But we continue to do those same things. We continue to do, if there's res wells at risk, we sample them. If there are, if there's, in the case where we don't have any res wells, we put it on the MPART webpage. We continue to talk with local officials, DHHS, local health department, and we follow 201 regulations in our current protocol. So the level of effort, because we do have to be judicious with our existing resources and our existing staff. I mean, we're at probably, we probably have 120 different people working on PFAS sites right now. And it's not their only job, though. I mean, to be honest, it's not their only job. But we probably got 120. There are 4 of us that are full-time for PFAS, and everybody else is spread among the divisions. That's just Eagle. DHHS probably has, oh gosh, I would say another 40 people working on PFAS in addition, and the other agencies as well. So as the risk goes up, obviously our level of effort and engagement and making sure that we have everybody covered definitely goes up. In the cases where we don't know if there's, we're not even sure there's a significant significant source of PFAS, we'll do general education, we'll continue to do outreach. But if there's no res wells in the area, then, we're not gonna do the full scale notification. So what you won't see in here is based on our current level of staffing, based on our current level of funding. We just realistically cannot do a full scale notification of 1 mile around every site. That would be pretty extensive for us. We are at the point with 208 sites. I will say it's getting pretty tight to keep all of this rolling. Staff are getting pretty overwhelmed with the amount of work that this creates in their daily lives. So trying to see if there's anything else that I missed. Kelly, anything else I missed before I have Sandy go ahead and start questions?
Not that I can think of.
Or Andy, I see Andy Draheim is on as well before we go over to questions. Anything else that I've missed from a department agency part you want to mention?
Nope. I think a tool like this could be a good thing to take to the case studies that the committees do too, so you can bounce what's happening, what should be happening, and look for places where experience might lead us in a different direction or to improvements.
Yeah, I think that's part of what we have hoped and tried very, I think successfully to do with MPART is to make sure that we have been flexible along the way. If we see ways to improve what we're doing or to make efficiencies, we're not, this isn't set in stone, but this seems to be the best way to achieve the goals that we've got of, protection of public health, making sure the environment's protected, as well as making sure as many people know as possible. So, all right, jump in there, Sandy.
All right, it's weird to call on myself, but I guess I'll start by calling on myself. Sandy, what do you think? Okay, so I appreciate the fact that it sounds like we are all in agreement that protection of public health is our number one thing. Everybody's in agreement with that. And I think we can all agree that Eagle has a lot of sites and a lot of work to do that's not even PFAS related, but that takes a lot of manpower. My concern, I guess, and what I'm hearing is that while you recognize that, you're still, nothing really changed. You're gonna notify people that you want to check your well and do that, but the people, I don't know, a quarter of a mile away are not going to be notified until you have results of wells. And so we're going to still have this delay. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? If we were to put this scenario in my house, in my neighborhood now, Tobin McNaughton still would have not heard until my well results came back in August.
If we had actual results on the landfill itself, we, you know, I think in knowing which way groundwater would have gone,
But so we would have all waited again for all of that information to come in.
we would have had to have some data. We would have either
Okay.
sampled your wells first. You know, in that case, if it would have been House Street, our first result would have been sample the
Sure.
wells right around the house, you know, step out a little bit, make sure we understood which way groundwater flow was going, but then to
But
start.
meanwhile, the McNaughtons would have been drinking this pregnant and stuff. And I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying this sounds like a manpower issue that
Mhm.
we don't have the manpower to send out letters. And I got to believe there's a way to fix that. I'm not sure what it is, but I got to believe there's a way to fix it, whether it's to pull in partnerships with, I don't know, NGOs that can help us with notification, whether it's, I don't know how, I'm open to ideas, but I just think, or we look for funding for more manpower at Eagle. I don't know how we do it, but that's just my thoughts, is it feels like we're still back at the same place we were, and we got to hire people or find people. Anybody else have thoughts or questions or ideas? I'll be quiet. All right, they're popping up here. Tony, go ahead.
Now you got your hands.
I got hands up. All right, Tony, go
Now
ahead.
you have your hands full. I just want to say that I think that where we are now and is not acceptable. Again, recognizing that there are limitations, but I'll give another example, as Sandy did. In our community, we know that the agency knew, for example, that our lake was being contaminated for a number of years until it was suspected and discovered that drinking water wells were being impacted. That's too long. And there are a number of people, some of them who are on this committee, who made decisions that would not have been made if they had had that information that the agency had. And so I really think that the kind of the difference between the agency and people like a number of us on this committee is that we have to find a way to make this happen, because it has such an impact on our lives. It isn't, you know, again, not to put anybody down, but this isn't a, you know, part of our job in a folder that comes across our desk. This is something we live with every day. And I'm hoping that there is a way that there can be an engagement here, perhaps to try this approach on a pilot basis, picking out maybe the next investigation that starts, or a certain type of investigation that starts, maybe with some help, with some help and assistance from people on this group if they're willing to do that. But I know that we've got to find a way to do better, understanding that there's only so many dollars to go around, so many people to go around, but to try to find a way to get information out to people. I really think it is not only to protect public health, but I think it also puts the agency in a much better position, because when people find out that information that impacts their lives is out there and within the possession of the agency and has not been conveyed to them, it puts a severe damper on the credibility of the agency with the public. And so I think that has to be, part of the mix. Again, recognizing this is not a simple push the button kind of situation. I'm just hoping that we can brainstorm and find a way to make some things happen. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks, Tony. All right. Remember, if you're not speaking, be sure you're on mute so you don't drown the person out. All right, Lynn, go ahead. You're up next.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is seamless so far. I love it. I agree absolutely with what Sandy said. I guess it's like, I know how hard MPART has worked. The staff and talking about trying to be flexibly strategic, they have done an amazing job with the resources they have, but you don't have someone come and put out a fire and say, well, we only have 3 hoses. So if we can't take care of that house that's burning next to that third one, I guess we'll just have to stop. We just don't have enough money. We don't have approval for these extra hoses. It's like nonsense. You find them, you do everything you can to put the fire out on the whole street. And this is one of those situations where there really is the most obvious decision. We need more staff and we need more money. We need to help advocate to someone higher than you, Abby. And if that's on to legislators, governor, whatever, it's like, hey, MPART was formed to accomplish this. We have 208 sites and you didn't give us a budget and you haven't given us enough staff. Nobody in a business would accept that model. No homeowner would accept that model. It doesn't make any sense at all to give you this enormous task and not equip you. And so I'm with no, we don't need to do any pilot studies. We need to get money and staff so you can do the job that needs to be done. Absolutely. To me, it's as clear as day. And I think it's great to have people kind of patchwork in and help and volunteer, but you don't cover the whole thing. I mean, you can all try to help put out a fire with regular garden hoses, but if you need big hoses, if we need the expertise of Eagle, we need the equipment. And I think that message has to get out absolutely, and it needs to get out now. And so again, like what Tony said, no criticism of anybody, but come on, guys, we got to do it, and let's do it. That's how I feel.
Thank you, Lynn. You always have great analogies. Okay, Charlie.
Thanks, Sandy. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. A couple questions for Abby. Congratulations on the terrific windfall of in the billions, sounds like, several billion. That funding, is obviously going to go a lot for infrastructure improvements and whatnot, work out in communities, but parts of Eagle certainly became flush as a result of that. MPART did not. And when those other areas of Eagle became flush, can some of their funding that was, be freed up for use by MPART, I guess would be my question. And then the second question would be, can we get a copy of your slide there?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I'll pass this out. Kelly can get the slide out around when we before we get done tonight. And Charlie, I'm gonna ask Andy to help me out, but I was under the understanding, Andy, that all of that 2 billion was going to come in and go right back out. Is that the case?
I'll circulate the numbers with the COG. I'm not deeply involved in our budget. I'm going to give you some numbers that may be off, but I'll clean up my mess. I think the number I heard is 96% of that money, and it may be more as it turned out in the negotiations, goes right back out the door. So it's that money will be granted largely to communities, primarily for water infrastructure projects in communities. It's more complicated and diverse, the funding, than that, but that is, in a nutshell, the big picture. So no, there's not other divisions within Eagle that are experiencing some kind of access to greater resources as a result of that. In fact, you could make the case that the limited, I think it's less than the equivalent of 4 people to help move that money out into the extra hands to move that money out into the communities is inadequate, in that, we've actually taken on more work than the resources that have come in. So that's the maybe not 100% accurate, but again, I'll fill in the details, but that's the general picture of that. So just there's not money going other places that can be moved into this space from the supplemental.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And were the sort of the direction, who or where did that come from on how funds are to be used?
Pardon me?
As far as the, what party or what parties made the decisions on how funds are to be used?
Well, I may get off my comfort level and my knowledge base, but it was a negotiation with the legislature and the governor's office. But keep in mind too that, that funding traces back to COVID relief, federal COVID relief dollars. It traces back to Recovery Act dollars, and then there's some general fund dollars as well. I can get you, there's really good analyses online. I'll before the end of the meeting, I'll put a link in the chat that will allow you to really look at that supplemental and where the money came from, where it's coming from, and where it's going to.
Okay, thank you.
And Andy, I think we can probably share an analysis of our budget too, right? Our proposed budget at this point. I don't think anything's final on our budget, but at least for what became the Senate Bill 565.
Yeah, that's what I was discussing.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yeah. So as Andy said, I think the $2 billion coming in is going straight back out, and we really didn't get, I think we got maybe 2 limited term staff to try to push $2 billion through. So it's actually a bigger burden on the department than if we would have actually gotten any real dedicated money. But anyways, we'll pass that along to the COG so you guys can take a look at it too.
But yeah, I don't want to be negative about it. It's a huge step forward for our state. These are long overdue investments in our infrastructure that, are going to help us adapt to climate. Like Abby said, will, in indirect ways help address challenges like PFAS. So, I certainly didn't want to leave the impression that, we're not thrilled to be moving that money out into Michigan communities.
Thank you, Andy.
All
That
right.
was more eloquent than I could have done. So.
All right, Connie, you're up next.
Okay, I just want to agree totally with what Lynn has mentioned. She also said it far better than I could have said it. I think that to get some action on PFAS, there probably is going to have to be a PFAS legislative day where we combine with our COG along with the Great Lakes PFAS Action Network, along with the Ecology Center, set a date, and we hammer the legislators to put money into looking and resolving some of these PFAS issues. Secondly, I'm really, really, really disappointed with just looking at residential drinking water wells. If you do not comply with Part 201, do your investigation, identify the polluter, have the polluter do the remediation. If you don't do that, your plume is going to be expanding and you're going to have more drinking water wells. So what you're doing is not very effective at all. You have to identify the polluter and get that party to do the cleanup, do the remediation. Why would we be talking about prevention if we're not going to attack the source of the problem? The source of the problem is the polluter. You nail the polluter and get him to remediate the site to stop it from expanding. So I think that that's some of the key points I wanted to make. All right. Also, I thought too, this flexibly strategic is a little too bureaucratic, Abby. It's bureaucratic language, which doesn't advance. You want to talk simply so that people can understand. And I just find, I just get repelled by bureaucratic language. And this one really sounded bureaucratic to me, but that's just my point of view. Thank you.
Okay, Connie, let me just follow up on your piece about the 201 regulations. Yeah, obviously the drinking water wells would get sampled because the process for 201 does take a while and can take a long time in many cases. And so to follow up with the normal process for Part 201 to identify the polluter and to identify and have them start investigations and in some cases, many years of investigations before they actually get to any kind of cleanup, we would want to do that understanding of the drinking water wells before that happens. So in no way was I saying that we wouldn't follow the normal 201 process to identify the polluters as well.
Abby, you have to make it move a lot faster. I will tell you, I was involved with the Carter Superfund site in Detroit. It's a Superfund site. We got that cleaned up in 4 years. We had lots of PRPs, but we got it done fast. Why? Because there was a low income group of neighbors that were really being impacted. You've got to get the movement going a lot faster than what you're going. And if it means more resources, then we do the legislative day to get you those resources.
All right.
Happy
Thank you, Connie. All right. I got to keep us moving here, folks. All right, Rick, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with what Sandy said, and also what Tony said about trying to have a notification process when we know that there's PFAS in the area, that we get some level of notification out when there's residential drinking wells that are potentially impacted. I looked back, almost a month and a half, a little over a month and a half, and there was only 2 sites that had residential wells. One was this Eagle, Ottawa site in Newaygo, and the other one was the Muskegon wastewater system. And I'd really like to know how much it would, if you only have 2 sites that show up in a month, how hard is it to get a notification out when there's a PFAS site with residential wells? I don't know how hard that is. I'd like to understand the complexity of the site. That's why we're taking a little deeper dive on that Newaygo County one. But our first priority is to make sure that people are not drinking PFAS contaminated water, and there's always a possibility of pregnancy or young child in the neighborhood, and we just have to do everything we can to let people know that there could be a problem. I mean, we send out boil water advisories for lack of residual chlorine and things like that. I mean, this is just as serious. It's long-term health issue rather than getting stomach flu or something. So I just would like to look at, as sites come up, what it would take to notify people within that 1 mile radius, or the 1 mile radius or whatever. So and then Kelly was nice enough to share another site. I don't know if it's listed on the MPART yet, but it's a GM warehouse. It looked like in Oakland County, and there was probably 700-800 houses around it. So I mean, that's a difficult one. But I would like to see on those two sites what it would take. Talk with the site managers. Let's see how complicated that process is. So that's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Yeah. I
Thanks,
look forward to
Rick.
the conversation, Rick.
All right, if people could be sure you lower your hand after you've spoken, or else I'm going to get all confused. Also, I'm going to call on people who haven't spoken yet before I go to people to talk again, if that's okay. So I think Tyler, you're next.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. So at a high level, I've been part of the COG for a few months now, so certainly fresh eyes is we got to increase testing. Ignorance is not bliss with PFAS. So some of my insights that the others have shared is MPART has constrained resources. The work I do for a living is managing constrained resources. So I do have empathy. Every business, every organization has a certain amount of resources they can deal with. But PFAS is a lot larger than what we understand it to be today. My data point would be how now we're at 210 sites. Just a few years ago, we were at 50. So I think if we continue on this path, we're going to continue to get, frustration. We're not doing enough. So what's the out of the box thinking look like? How can we partner with our legislators like others have said? And even, going so far, what if the governor said, hey, every resident on groundwater, you should probably think about testing your water because the current state is pretty much nothing. So I'll stop there. Grateful for all the work that we're doing, but unfortunately, with the constraint resources, we got to figure out a different way. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. That's
Yep.
great ideas. There's someone here on a phone, and I can't see what the number is. So if
313-399-0735.
There we go. If that person would like to talk, I have no idea how to unmute yourself, but.
Hi, this is Teresa. I had to join by phone today. So I just wanted to let you guys know that I've been listening, and I agree with you, Tony. And I just wanted to piggyback off of, I don't know if it was Sandy or Connie said that the polluter should pay. I know the late Isaac Robinson, state representative, he was part of Hamtramck in Detroit. He sponsored a bill called Polluters Pay. So maybe we can look at that, and maybe we can kind of work on drafting some legislation and talking to our legislators about polluters pay. So that's all I wanted to say. I'm not going to hold everybody because I know other people have to comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa. I'm glad you could jump on. All right, Dave Wynn. You're muted, Dave. It was a good speech, but you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. One of the things that I think what I'm hearing is what I've heard so far is that MPART and parts of Eagle and the divisions within the state of Michigan are constrained manpower wise and can't get a lot of this stuff done. All I'm going to say, because I said it once before, is that Andy, I think maybe this is something that the part of the executive order for Governor Whitmer's 6-step plan to reevaluate manpower and assignments within the groups within Michigan, state of Michigan, I think needs to be a priority. It needs to be one of the items that looked at. If there is a constraint with manpower for MPART to be able to do this function and other functions along with, because of the increased sites that are coming up every month, this needs to be part of that 6-step plan, whether it's the funding is now or down the road, but it has to be part of that plan, is my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, I have Lynn and Tony are want to come back on. Andy, did you want to respond to that? Nope, just joining. Okay. So before Andy and Lynn and Tony go, is there anyone else that has a comment or question? Any non-CAG members that are just listening in? Anyone else want to speak up? Because I want to make sure we have as many voices heard as possible. All right, so Lynn, why don't you go ahead and go? Keep in mind, I'd like to wrap this section up in another 10 minutes. So Lynn, if you could make it short and sweet, go right ahead. Lynn, are you there?
Yes, I will make it
Okay.
short and sweet. First of all, I appreciate every comment made. I think we need to do like the beach advisory. We need to put a red flag up. And we need to call it urgent and not emergent. We need to get the money. So Andy, we need your help. We need everyone's help to get this done. We need every well tested. We've been saying that. I appreciate very much. I think I cannot, Tyler, I can't, yeah, that you again, you spoke very well about that. It's just too bad. Everybody needs to have their well water tested. And I'll close really briefly with this example, which is one of the reasons I made sure I attended tonight, is that I've recently been in touch with some of the people up in Pelston. And I realized I followed the timeline and this and that, and the investigation has expanded further south. I haven't had a chance to talk to the site manager, but it's going further south. Have these people further south been notified that it could be problematic as they're awaiting further results? That's the situation where we want to give them a chance. Just give them a heads up. So it keeps coming close to home, and I will leave it at that. And I'm grateful for all the other comments made tonight.
Thank you, Lynn. Mary Blanchard, you jumped on. What? Go ahead and speak up.
Hello. I think you said that there might be some legislators that are on this call. I would be interested, if any of them are, if they might be able to speak on some of the comments made tonight. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any staffers here or anybody here from the House or the Senate?
I don't.
I guess not. All right. Tony.
Thank you. Just a couple of follow-up, a question and a couple points. I think that we need an answer from Eagle as to how much manpower is needed and what the cost is. We can't just go to the legislature or to anybody else and say, we need money, we need money, we need money. We need to know, we need to have specifics. And I would really appreciate that. I also want to say that I think that my comment about doing a couple of pilots is aimed at the notion of testing whatever Eagle's assumptions are, and also testing what our assumptions are. I think it's the only way to kind of move forward, because there may be complexities we don't understand. There may be ideas. I really think that would be, it's not a way to say, let's just do this and drop it, but a way to say, hey, how do we move forward and how do we find a way forward? And I really just want to say that I'm given my experience with the agency over the last several years, I'm concerned. I get it that there's a manpower issue, and I don't have any doubt that that's a huge problem, but there too often seems to be a willpower issue as well. And when we approach these problems and say, we just can't do it, we just can't do it, it costs too much money, we can't do it, we can't do it. Again, we're at a point where that's just not an acceptable answer, and we need to start digging in and finding ways to make it happen. They may be difficult, they may require outside the box thinking, but again, people like us on this group are committed to make sure that we find ways to do that. So willing to work in any way we can, and I just wanted to put my prior comments in that context. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. I think it's kind of I'm not even going to do a vote. I'm guessing it's a consensus that we all agree Eagle probably needs more manpower to do public notification, but that we have to do a better job at this. We can't just stick with the plan that we currently have in place. And I guess if we need to think outside the box, I guess what I'm worried about is we have the short-term need. We've worked on this for almost a year now. We're in April. I think the committee put this request forward back in, I don't know, June or July. And so we're working on a year of this request, and it feels like we've not really moved the ball that much forward. And so I guess maybe we need another subgroup that comes up with a creative way to do right now public notification of the things that come out now. Again, I can get flyers from politicians every frickin' day in my mailbox. So there's a way to know who's voting and who lives where, because they send it to me all the time. So there's got to be a way for us to do this. So I guess, how about if we do this, you guys? How about if we send out an email and people want to come together and brainstorm on what to do next for the next step? I don't know, but I don't feel comfortable just leaving it like ta-da. Anybody got an idea?
Sandy, there's a 313 number on here that has their hand raised, and I don't know
Is
if
that
that's
Teresa still?
I don't know if it's a member. Okay.
Teresa, did you have another idea, or you just can't lower your hand because you're on the phone? I'm impressed you could raise your hand on the phone. Dave, did you have another idea, or your hand's just raised?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. Okay, I want to spend more time on this, but I don't think we should. So this is probably going to be an offline email conversation, at least to get some thoughts going on how to do this best. And I guess we'll go from there. So the next thing is the biosolids and PFAS and the concern for food safety. And I know, I think we had a group of questions that we had just brainstormed and thought about. So I guess I'll leave it to whoever is going to do this talk.
It's going to be a group of us, if you don't mind. And so I'm not sure if you want us to kind of work our way through the questions and take questions as we go. But there's a lot here. This is quite meaty, so we may not get through all of it today. The first question that, and we kind of reordered them because I think we kind of grouped all the biosolid stuff together. And so this particular first question, I think, kind of starts with more of the approach. So it says that Maine is ahead of Michigan in the issue of food safety. What is Michigan doing compared to Maine's response? And so I wanted to step back from even just food safety and talk about some of the differences between Maine and Michigan as far as our approaches. And we are collaborating. I will let you know, we collaborate with Maine quite frequently. We have pretty frequent conversations about what they're doing with their farms, what they're doing with their biosolids, what they're doing with their deer sampling, their turkey sampling. We've got a lot of toxicologists talking back and forth. So the two states have been collaborating on quite a few things. But I will say they've kind of approached it in a different manner than we have. And so MPART kind of started with the source reduction, source identification, and approaching it more in a holistic baseline approach where we gathered all the information to try to look at, okay, what's the status of our groundwater? What's the status of our wastewater? What's the status of our surface water? What's the status of our sources? What do we know about those? How do we reduce those sources so that we can start understanding the true effects to food and to the more holistic approach to Michigan. Maine has kind of come at it from a kind of a different approach. They've actually gone and started testing the food and are working their way down to the sources in that direction, which is maybe a little easier for them because they have a smaller number of inputs into their food basket. They've got farms that are smaller. They've got fewer wastewater treatment plants, and just the way they've regulated things. That didn't really work for us on it for a number of reasons. And so by taking that holistic approach, I will say that's part of the methodology difference in the approaches that we've been able to take. So I think we're both getting to the same point. And as we compare the information between the two states, we're not that far off on what we're finding or how but how we're getting there is quite a bit different. And so what they've seen in their milk, for instance, is they were able to actually trace it back from their milk sources, where our milk comes from across the state. And it might go into one or two distributors, which would be harder to separate out without actually going to every single farm across the state. And so we've just chosen to take a different approach than what Maine has done in the same aspect. And so with that, I would say that both states are responding, but in a different manner and kind of approaching it from two different aspects. I think we're both in very similar situations. So what I will tell you, Maine has not done a full analysis of all of their drinking water sources yet. They started with source areas and just did drinking water wells around those sources. They have been doing fish. They have been doing their milk testing, but they haven't done the wide scale baseline testing that we've been doing. When we go to do this stuff, when you see these MPART sites come through, all of these sites are getting vetted by our MDARD, our Department of Agriculture, Rural Development staff are looking at all those sites that come through to see what farms are around those locations. Is there anything about those sites that might impact a farm, whether it's groundwater contamination or what we know about surface water or anything else? We're doing that step as they're going through the process. And then we're hoping that, as we continue to address and reduce sources across our state, that we're going to eliminate the potential for additional impacts to any kind of our, whether or not it's fish or it's groundwater or surface water or farms or any of that stuff, that we're, by identifying the sources and removing them, that we're addressing the future of those potential contaminations. So I think that's part of what we wanted to talk about when we come to a Maine and Michigan comparison. And I'm going to call on Stephanie Kamer. Stephanie, anything else for, because you've worked quite a bit with Maine as well for biosolids. Anything else you wanted to add for that discussion point?
I think though it is safe to say it's a different approach. So we've done a lot more looking at PFAS levels in wastewater and municipal wastewater and industrial wastewater. We've done a lot. We require sampling. They've not required sampling at treatment plants. We require biosolids to be sampled before application, and we require through industrial pretreatment program that our municipalities implement, we require them to look at sources of PFAS and implement source reduction. So we've got a lot of facilities in Michigan where we've got actual sources of PFAS that go into municipal wastewater with treatment in place already. And I think, so, we are approaching them in different directions. We have been focusing on getting it out of the system before it gets to the treatment plant, of tackling it at the source and identifying those significant sources. So,
yeah. So hopefully that, and we'll get down to the issue of food safety. We've kind of reordered these questions. So we will talk about food safety here in a minute. But I was hoping that maybe we could talk and let Stephanie and Mike Person is on, and who has, Mike is the expert in biosolids, has been doing biosolids for quite a long time. And so hopefully he's on. Right? Yes, there he is. Okay. Thanks. Good. So Stephanie and Mike, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, my name is Mike Person. I'm the State Biosolids Program Coordinator for Water Research Division.
Excellent. And you've been doing how many years, Mike? Just out of curiosity.
26 years.
Okay. So Mike knows his stuff and has a lot of history that he can tell with us here. So can we go, Sandy, are you good if we go to number 2 then?
Yeah, as long as, did anybody have a question about number 1, that the comment? It sounds like we're just approaching it different ways. So Connie has a question.
Yeah, Abby.
Tony has a question.
Abby, this is for you. You said we had a couple of dairy milk processing facilities. What you could have them do for each load that comes in, have them do a sample of that load of dairy milk, because they come in these great big papers. The dairy milk goes to the so have the processing facility grab a sample of the milk. Then you'll know if that farm has PFAS in that milk or not. Just a thought.
Thanks, Connie.
All right, Tony.
Yeah, just a couple quick questions. One, in light of the study that was published today, or at least the summary was published in the Detroit Free Press today, noting the fact that the effluent that comes out of the wastewater, the treated wastewater that comes out, actually has more PFAS than what comes in. How does that, are we seeing that same problem with the biosolids? And then doesn't that suggest that while it's great to stop it at the source, and I think that was a really good place to start, that we need to look beyond that? That's one question. The second question is, if we applied Maine's biosolids standard, or whatever their guidance is, that they only allow biosolids to be spread at a certain level, I think it's 2.5 parts per billion or something like that, what would that do to the program in Michigan? So those two questions.
So I guess to the first question with the article in the Free Press today, we did see that. And the information that was shared, that's part of information that, we are aware of. It wasn't really new information. We do have sample results from many facilities in Michigan, and in some cases the influent is higher than the effluent, but it's usually not very large differences. Sometimes it is there, and what is happening in the treatment plant, I don't think we fully know. You'd have to do a mass balance look at each facility to make that determination, and it might be difficult when you're talking about parts per trillion and trying to sort out. It could be, precursors that are breaking down into short chains. It could be part of the residual management of the process at the plant. So like as the process of the facility, residuals get resuspended in the process. And so you could just see that happening. And that's why the effluent is a little bit higher than the influent. It could be the detention time. So when the influent is sampled compared to when the effluent sampled, there's a detention time within the system. And are you catching the grab coming in and the grab going out? So there's a lot could be going on. I don't know that, that information really changes our approach, because we have been aware that, we do see that at some facilities, and there's more work that needs to be done, but source control, we do still think is our best effort, going to the sources of the PFAS that you can control and getting out of the system before it gets to the plant. So then, those processes in the plant aren't as impacted. So,
and Stephanie, I thought that for the results that we were actually seeing, it was like, if it was 10 parts per trillion coming in, it was like maybe 12 or 15 coming out. So it was a very slight increase. It wasn't like 10 coming in and 100 going out. This is
and that's definitely true for like the longer chains, like the PFOS and the PFOA. For the shorter chains, I don't know what the comparison is, but it's not orders of magnitude difference that you were seeing. So again, what exactly is happening at each individual plant, we'd have to, you could spend a lot of money to do a really detailed study. But, I think our approach is still the same, knowing that more information needs to, can happen in the future, looking at the processes at the plant. And then
Tony's second question was about how does that impact our biosolids program now?
the article, how does that impact our program now, or the?
No, my question is, Tony, my question was, if the main standard were applied to Michigan, how many farms would have to stop using I mean, what would it do to the biosolids program in Michigan?
Oh, I think it's difficult to answer that. So we did receive, results as part of our strategy from 160 some plants that sampled their biosolids last year. The concentrations, the average concentration was around 14 parts per billion for all of our facilities. And so we're implementing the strategy that we have in place. And I don't know that we've done a detailed study to see what the impacts would be if we looked at doing something different at this point. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything else to add on that.
No.
That probably lends itself right into question number 3 of whether or not there's been any attempts in Michigan to ban the use of biosolids. I wasn't aware of any. Mike, have you been aware of any?
No, other than, when we implemented the strategy, we through our testing, we identified a handful of facilities that we considered industrially impacted, and we suspended their land application programs while they, implemented source reduction efforts. But I'm not aware of any effort that's taken place previously to ban the practice in general across the state.
And I guess then just leading that into the second question, we did prohibit applications of industrially impacted biosolids in Michigan. So there were 6 facilities that had levels that we considered to be industrially impacted. 4 of those facilities were land applying. When we became aware of them back in 2017 and 2018, we moved to suspend their residual management plan so they could no longer land apply until they could address their sources and bring their concentrations down. And it was based on our information at the time of looking at, fields that had industrially impacted and seeing elevated levels. So, we have done some field testing of facilities in Michigan. We've done a study that was implemented back in 2018. We looked at both facilities that had, what we deemed to be industrially impacted biosolids, as well as those facilities that had lower concentrations or non-industrially impacted biosolids. We looked at fields from both. We went through a process of selecting the fields. We prioritized them based on, the amount of sludge they had received, the amount that was applied on the field, and the number of times it was applied. And when we looked at the industrially impacted fields that received those biosolids had higher concentrations in all the media we sampled compared to those with the lower concentrations. And it was significantly lower at the other fields. And that's why we've been focusing our efforts on the industrially impacted levels to make sure that we're, not continuing to land apply those.
Go ahead, Sandy. I'll call on you.
Okay, that works better. I'm just trying to, and now I don't farm, so I don't know much about this. I farm at Meyer in the produce department, but it sounds like we know that we're putting this on the ground. We know it doesn't go away, and yet we're still growing crops with it. Is that accurate?
So we don't have criteria to compare against at this point. There is
Well,
no.
I don't have criteria on how deep to cut my arm either. I just know I shouldn't. So I'm just trying to sort out. We know it's in there and we know it's not going away, right? It doesn't evaporate or anything. So I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. We know that, and yet we're still applying it and we're still letting food be produced with that. That's what our stance is right now, because we don't have any regulation.
We're not allowing industrially impacted biosolids to be applied any longer in Michigan. And that's been the case since 2017, 2018. The other biosolids, there are level, there are lower levels of PFAS present in the biosolids. Those are still being land applied. We have like a strategy that talks about, you know, what the facility needs to do depending on the concentrations that are in the biosolids. If anything over 50 parts per billion, they have to mitigate the land application. So they have to reduce application of those biosolids by half. So they have to cut the application rate by half. So we are putting in place things to mitigate, but we don't have criteria yet in order to know what is risk-based, you know, what is safe to be applied, you know, on the fields. And we're waiting for EPA to complete that risk assessment, which they're in the process of doing right now. So this is something that, you know, EPA is looking into, they're going through. And I think Mike was going to talk about this when we got to that question below. So I hate to run over you, Mike, but there is, you know, a process in place that EPA is following to do a risk-based assessment on biosolids. And as they go through that, we're implementing this strategy to try to mitigate, you know, what we know are potential risks. So no application of industrially impacted biosolids moving forward. And then kind of a tiered process looking at identifying sources and getting it out of the system before it gets to the treatment plant.
And this is kind of where we go, Sandy, back to the part about being, and I know Connie doesn't like the word, but flexibly strategic, because we don't have the regulatory authority necessarily to say what's safe and what's not, but we know that we want to drive those numbers down as low as possible. So what's the lowest we can get those numbers to still be a beneficial product for farmers, but be protective for our public. And so that's where we're trying to get to, is trying to understand that. And we're not, you know, we need the risk assessment that EPA is going to do. We really need that kind of an assessment done so we can truly understand what this is, because that's something that we don't have, you know, we're not doing here in the state. That's something that they've been doing a pretty robust risk assessment for many years on other contaminants besides PFAS for biosolids. So. All right. Do we want to continue
just keep
on
going.
with the questions? Yep.
Did we want to take on number 4 there? Who tests biosolids from a wastewater treatment plant? Well, let me start and maybe talk about what biosolids are and what they're not. The term itself is used a lot of different ways by a lot of people. So I think maybe it's good to understand so when we're referring to biosolids, we're talking about the residuals that are generated during the treatment of municipal wastewater, and they undergoes biological mechanical treatment processes that stabilize and kill pathogens, essentially make them so they can be suitable for reuse on the land. You know, typically on agricultural land, it's a great form of alternative to like synthetic type fertilizers. Biosolids are not like from industrial processes in industrial waste, commercial waste. In certain instances, those materials can be beneficially used as well, but those are not biosolids because they have not been authorized through the Michigan Part 24 administrative rules. The Michigan Part 24 administrative rules were promulgated under Part 31 of the Water Resource Protection Act, and it has a full weight and authority of that act. And so the biosolids program is highly regulated. I just wanted to kind of communicate that, because a lot of times, you know, like I think Eagle Ottawa was mentioned, was referred to as biosolids. Technically, that's not, as far as I know, that's not biosolids. So we're narrowly talking about the materials that are land applied under the Part 24 administrative rules in Michigan. So the question about who tests biosolids. So the Part 24 rules go through a lot of requirements for the program for any municipality or wastewater treatment plant that wishes to participate in that program. They need to have what we refer to as a residuals management program. And it's a way for the municipality to spell out specifically how they're going to comply with all the regulatory components of Michigan Part 24 administrative rules. So ultimately, if that's approved, it sets forth the sample collection process, how the materials are going to be treated, how they're going to be land applied, the frequency of sampling, the parameters are going to be sampled. But ultimately, once approved, the commitments in the RMP is what's required by the rules. So I hope that so ultimately it's the wastewater treatment plant that gets approval. It's their responsibility. I should probably add too about the Part 24 rules. When those are basically geared in large part by the federal requirements, the federal standards for land application called the 40 CFR Part 503. Those are federal standards for land application. And those were developed on a very, very extensive risk assessment that was conducted by EPA and really actually the national top researchers, microbiologists, toxicologists, where they went through land application over a 10, 15-year span and looked at all the different pathways that the practice could potentially be harmful and developed requirements that were geared to make sure that the practice was protective of public health and the environment. So that's kind of what that was the genesis for the Michigan program. So because any state that has to has to be at least as restrictive as the federal requirements. So that's what happened in 1998. We promulgated the administrative rules, and so we've been essentially implementing those ever since. So I guess that kind of gets into question 5 as well. So it's ask who sets the level and deems the levels to be safe. Those levels and those standards that are set forth in the rules in the 40 CFR were developed by EPA. We in Michigan, when we promulgated administrative rules, we are more restrictive than the federal government in many respects. But as far as the pollutants of concern that are typically tested for, those were based in large part by the risk assessment that EPA conducted. And by the way, as was mentioned, they are currently doing a similar risk assessment for PFAS, and that's expected to be finalized by 2024, I believe.
And Mike, just to clarify, just in case I missed it, for number 4, who tests actually the biosolids? It's the wastewater treatment plants that have to do their testing and submit it to us for a review and approval before they can land apply, correct?
That information, well, they are required through their RMP to test in certain pollutants of concern, okay, and so that information, there is requirements and there are ceiling limits that were developed by the risk assessment. Those results are submitted to us annually in an annual report, and they're reviewed. But the annual report covers the previous year's land application practice. But we would know, I mean, if there was an exceedance of one of the standards.
All right, Connie.
Yeah, just a quick question for you, Mike. Could you define residuals? Is it human feces with all the pharmaceuticals in it? Just define the term residuals. And then after that, answer the question, is EGLE more restrictive, because it can be, than the federal water biostandards or biosolids standards? Does EGLE require any WW treatment plant to test for PFAS compounds?
So there was 2 parts of the question.
Yeah, define
residuals, and then I think the second part you're fading out. Were you asking about PFAS sampling?
Yeah, because EGLE can be more restrictive. So are you requiring PFAS sampling?
So when I refer to residuals, I'm talking in the context of biosolids, I'm talking about the residuals that are generated during the treatment of municipal wastewater. A wastewater treatment plant is, treats wastewater through biological, mechanical, and chemical processes. And it's principally biological in nature. They provide an environment where certain microorganisms flourish. They go through their life cycle. and they settle out, and these settleable solids that I would define as these residuals from wastewater treatment plants. Those residuals are then carried forward, run through additional treatment measures to reduce vectors, reduce pathogens. And then that's when that material essentially becomes biosolids, which can then be authorized for beneficial use, provided a number of other requirements are met. And to get to the second question, yes, when we implemented our PFAS strategy for biosolids in Michigan, we did require any facility in Michigan that's going to land apply biosolids is required to test those biosolids, collect a representative sample for PFAS. So we've done that. We just got through in 2021. I think we have results from 168 wastewater treatment plants in Michigan, the PFAS results. And we're just starting a 2022 season.
All right. Charlie, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Sandy. I got a question for Mike. The wastewater treatment plant testing that you spoke to just now and earlier, do the parties being tested, are they, is it scheduled in advance? Is it on a known schedule that's known to, for example, only to them, only to you? Is it public knowledge?
They are, depending on the size of the facility, potential for sources dictates the number of samples they collect. They would collect, we require that sample to be collected of biosolids that would be representative of the material to land apply. I don't know if this is answering your question, but and then that data is then submitted to us through My Waters.
I guess my wasn't my question, but what I'm kind of get at is can the testing process be manipulated at all in terms of it's there's a history of this in some industries where we're testing on such and such a day and such a month, and if there are certain kinds of effluent coming in, if the dischargers know, then potentially the test may or may not reflect reality the rest of the time when there's no testing going on, because we don't have the benefit of continuous testing.
The wastewater treatment plants, I can tell you for sure, don't want PFAS any more than anybody does wanted to be hitting the wastewater treatment plant. And I believe that in generally the wastewater treatment plants are going to do everything they can to identify any significant sources of PFAS coming into their wastewater plant. But the potential always exists. The nice thing about the way the system is set up in Michigan is our rules were promulgated in Part 31. We have the full enforcement component of the Water Resource Protection Act, up to $25,000 a day, criminal, potentially criminal. Generally speaking, we don't have that, but I suppose the potential always exists for unscrupulous people out there collecting samples.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for considering my question.
Did you guys get to the last question about crops, or do we have any information about how this is impacting our food? I guess trying to move us along here.
We do have some people on from our MPART agency that have come along to help us with some of the crop questions. Chris, are you on?
I am. Good evening, everybody.
I'm gonna go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Christine Kosmowski, and I'm the PFAS and Emerging Contaminant Specialist with MPART. And previous to that, I have worked in various other areas of water, including wastewater. So the question that's listed there is what crops are most vulnerable, and we're still trying to figure that out. I think we're getting more and more information to help us with that. But but we have a toxicologist that works with FDA and USDA, and she does a lot of research and trying to figure out, what types of crops could take up PFAS more than others. What are the soil levels there that could contribute to that? This is all. Which is difficult about all of this is that we don't know yet. We can't go to the PFAS manual right now and get that figured out. So this is all still under development. But the next question is our food safe? And I will say that MDARD is working, we're actively working within the MPART structure, and we have the pleasure of working with everyone from Eagle and the work that they're doing. And we also work with USDA and FDA on various projects to help monitor our overall food safety. Abby mentioned that we have a procedure whenever a PFAS site is identified. We do scrutinize, actually it's a 1 mile circle that we look at through all of the divisions within MDARD to see if there is something that could be at risk. And if so, we get back with Eagle and discuss it and then take any additional measures or actions should it be warranted. But we also are looking at what is being done at the national level too. And to date, only one beef operation has needed a high level of scrutiny, and that was in part because of the work that Eagle had done to identify those industrially impacted biosolids. And the magnitude of those biosolids were way beyond what they're even considering, like an order of magnitude higher. So for example, like 2,100 parts per billion versus their cutoff now, I think it's going to be lowered to 125. So this was a very significant amount of biosolids, that were applied at this particular site. It was unique in that the farmer was raising his cattle as well as his feed. And although the drinking water was non-detect, it was the combination of the feed and the grazing that led to our concerns, as well as, and what was in our toxicologist had done some modeling that indicated there was a concern, which led us to do additional testing to issue the consumption advisory that was issued at that farm in January. So we do know that FDA has done a market basket, a nationwide food basket study. The FDA, I can bring it up actually, the total diet study, and they have done this. Can you see it all right?
It's coming. Yep, there it goes.
So this was issued in August of 2021, and they did find 3 food samples with detectable levels of PFAS. They were fish sticks, canned tuna, protein powder, and based on this, and they've done this in a couple of years, they are not concerned about the general food supply. And I would say that our approach has been very site specific. And I think the goal for us and probably MPART in general is site identification and source reduction. And should there be an issue at a specific site, we will definitely take action. One of the questions was, everyone is concerned and aware of the risks, posed to farmers, which is true. It's a devastating situation, but we are not reluctant to test that food should there be evidence that we should take action there, and that is what led us to the beef situation in Livingston County.
Chris, I think the other thing for the complexity of the situation is that according to the research and some of the stuff that we've accumulated as far as our understanding is that depending on how the farmer might use the crop, there are different concentrations in the roots versus the leaves versus the silage versus like a piece of corn. You know, the corn kernel has the least amount, but often the farmer might feed the entire stalk to the animals, or they may have haylage or alfalfa or stuff. And so we're seeing different concentrations depending on how they process it and what they're actually feeding to their animals. And so I think it really makes it very site specific as to how the farming model is, how the farm is being, actually operated versus the modeling we do. We have to really put in all those site specific. And I think that's been one of the challenges that you guys have faced in trying to understand the situation for farmers.
And the magnitude of the biosolids situation at this farm, as I said, is quite dramatic versus other areas in the state. And I think the levels in Maine, Stephanie, maybe you can weigh in. The soil levels there were much higher even than what we have found thus far in Michigan. That one particular milk scenario, I believe it was something like a half. It was from biosolids from a wastewater plant, but half of their flow was from a paper making plant that had a lot of PFAS, and there was a huge amount of PFAS there, more so even than our situation in Livingston County. But this has certainly been a learning experience for us.
If I could get to some questions, because what I don't want to do is I think a lot of us are very familiar with the Livingston farmer thing, the Maine farm issue. So I want to get to some questions here, because I think it still gets the concern to most of us that, have you tested our eggs? Have you tested our beef? Have you tested apples and fruit? I know that there is compost soil that's being sold in the state that's got PFAS in it that people are using in gardens. We know that there's fertilizer that does. So I think I want to move us along to some questions because we're getting down to time. Tony, did you have a question?
I did, and this isn't necessarily biosolid related, but it's related to the issue of food safety. And that's in 2019, Garrett Ellison published a story on MLive. The headline was, "Michigan is tiptoeing around PFAS in dairy agriculture." And he quoted from a speech that was given by an MDARD representative at the National PFAS Conference in Boston. I know his report is accurate because I was there. And what MDARD did at that time, according to MDARD, there was a farmer in Allegan County who had PFAS in his hay and his pond water. MDARD made the decision not to test the milk because they didn't want to put the farmer out of business. That's from MDARD. That's not an allegation from some third party. And I am very concerned about protecting our farm industry here in the state of Michigan, and don't want to put farmers out of business. But I also don't want to be spreading stuff around and having people unsuspectingly drinking milk that might not be helpful. And so my question is, has MDARD taken a different tack? When it gets this information, does it test milk? Or is it still following that same approach that was followed in the past?
I can't answer about this situation from 2019 or 2018 or whenever that happened. I wasn't here then, but I will say that should a situation arise, yes, we would.
Great. All right. Other questions? Comments? Oh, the questions are rolling in now. All right, Connie.
Yeah, a quick question for Christine. Can you tell me whether or not MDARD tests baby food? Because there was a study that came out in 2021 saying that there was lead and arsenic in baby food, and the parents lack the knowledge that there's heavy metals in the baby's baby food. So are you doing anything at all of that sort to check what's going into baby food from Michigan here?
Specifically in regards to lead or?
No, well, in regards to heavy metals and PFAS?
I am not, I really don't, I don't know. I'd have to check into that. I'm not sure how baby food is regulated, so I can't answer that question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Oh, all right. Thanks, Connie. Dave.
Yeah, I have a question. I was listening earlier, and I have a question. The wastewater treatment plant does their testing of the biosolids for land use. Are those biosolids then sent to a specific set of landowners or farmers, or does it go to a distribution center where it then gets distributed out to whoever wants to purchase the stuff? And is there some sort of a MSDS sheet that goes along with those?
So, in Michigan, Michigan is a little bit unique. In almost all of our biosolids are applied as bulk. So bulk is a term. It's in our rules, but bulk land application generally would refer to like agriculture would be considered bulk uses. Now there is the provision for if you have a situation where you meet a requirement referred to as Class A exceptional quality biosolids. It's when biosolids are run through an advanced treatment processes. You could actually, theoretically, you could bag that material and sell it in, for lawn or home landscaping uses. The material itself is considered essentially pathogen-free and safe for direct human contact, things of that nature. Now, we don't have any facilities in Michigan that are currently doing that, selling it in a bag form like that, like selling it in like Home Depot.
Okay, but my question is that again, is there when the wastewater treatment plant has this biosolid to distribute for land use, is there a set of specific people or farmers that get that, or does it go to distribution center where it could basically go to any farmer? I guess my point is,
okay,
if we know who those specific farmers are, then wouldn't those be the farms that are tested more than anything else? And if not, if it goes to distribution center, then there has to be what I would call some sort of a MSDS sheet that goes along with that fertilizer, letting each one of those farmers know that when they purchase that equipment or purchase that fertilizer or whatever it is, has certain amounts of this, that, and the other thing in it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't follow your question exactly. So when you said distribution centers, I was thinking in terms of a processing facility that would distribute it out and out. In Michigan, no, we biosolids is generally land applied under, well, as I said earlier, is land applied under a very strict set of standards. The municipality is responsible for assuring that all the requirements are met. So in almost all instances, there could be a few exceptions. The materials is most wastewater plants hire contractors that specialize just in their program. The wastewater plant is the permit holder. They are the generator. They are responsible to see that all the requirements are met. So in one of the requirements is that if they're going to land apply bulk biosolids, they have to go through a formal site approval process or site authorization process. So that information is submitted to us as part of their approved program. We review that. We make sure that those requirements are complied with. And then if it is, then that facility is allowed to use that field. So typically the farmer's not even doing the land application. Typically it's the contractor that finds a farmer that wants to participate in the program. They enroll the site in that program. And then they track, exactly how much material is taken out to that field, and that information is reported to us in their annual report.
So me as a farmer, I really wouldn't know if I have any type of PFAS in my biosolids when it comes to me or not.
Okay, well, okay, so the other part to that is now is part of our implementation strategy for the PFAS and biosolids strategy. We do have a requirement for communication to happen. It's a big part of the transparency of what we're trying to do. So the facility is not only required to sample prior to land application, but then they have to communicate to the landowner or farmer prior to land applying exactly what their PFAS concentrations are. And that communication, is typically what it does. It provides some basic information about PFAS and biosolids, what we know about our strategy, and then it talks about the PFOS concentration. Then it also gives contact information. We have a state contact list so that if a farmer has additional questions, they can call and talk with one of us. We have our Eagle Biosolids team that's listed on this program, so they have a place to call, ask questions, generic questions, whatever they want. The other thing we did is we provide a link. We created a website on our MPART land application workgroup website specifically for farmers or landowners. And again, we require that link to be sent. Again, if a farmer wants more information, they can go there. They can go on the website. They can see, there's some generic information, some general information, some discussion on the strategy, how we're going. And then it gives a bunch more links if they really want to kind of do their research. So that's our effort to communicate with the landowner and farmers on that. Sorry, I didn't quite follow your question at the beginning.
Okay, thank you.
I have just really one quick question. How many of the PFAS in that class are you testing for? Is it just PFOA, PFOS? Is it just the 7? Are you testing for short chains or?
I think they have to do the whole what is it, Stephanie, 28?
So we recommend that they follow the MPART recommended list, which was 28. But we require that they sample for this, I think, 6 analytes where we have 201 criteria for them, and they have to report that. So, but we do almost all of them, to my knowledge, are sampling the minimum list, so they're getting the 28.
Yeah, I don't think there's any that haven't tested for the full 28 analytes.
Great. We're kind of getting down towards the end and we still have questions on there. And I suspect that you've given us so much information, we will sadly have even more questions about food, especially since articles are coming out about smelt and fish and eggs and, it's every day now, packaging. So thank you for doing that. And hopefully you can come back next month and answer even more questions. And we can finish up this list because I know there are questions about Detroit biosolids maybe being a little unique and fruits and vegetable spray. So
I will say, Sandy, for number 12, I think that was a Teresa's question. We're gonna address that one a little bit differently. We've got to dig into that question because it's not quite well, first of all, it's not a biosolid, as Mike was saying. That's not the same. It's not the right term to use for industrial waste. And I think she's talking about a completely different process. So we're going to break that question down into maybe a different presentation or an offline conversation or something like that, because I think we need to dig into exactly what information Teresa wants to get out of that question. So just know we're digging into it a little bit, because the more we dug into it, the more complex it got.
Okay.
And I did talk to Teresa to find out exactly what this meant. So there were a couple questions that were added that did address this portion of the question. So the rest of it we're still working on.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe for the next meeting, we can continue to talk about food safety and all of that. I don't want to lose sight of the public notification and all the comments that people had about the need for additional staffing. And it sounds like we've got kind of long-term solutions are we have to figure out a way to beef up staffing at Eagle, but short-term solutions are we still feel very strongly that we got to figure out a way to notify people in the public as this goes on. So maybe, I don't know, you guys, do you want to do an offline conversation about that? Do you want to How does COG
I think
members want to do
maybe
that?
one suggestion Rick had for walking through a site, I think that'd probably be a great first step. And then maybe we can continue the conversation from there.
I think it is, Abby, but I'm just going to be honest with you. That's yet one more month that we're dragging this out. And 1 month will turn into 3 months and we'll be at 1.5 years then. I've worked in government before. I was married to a state employee. I know how this works. So I'm just trying to think of creative short term. I think Tyler was the one who said, let's think outside the box and think of creative ways. And that's what I'm trying to do. If that means, I don't care if we bring in area churches that spread out handouts. I don't care how we do it, that we get public notification going, just to see what it would take for manpower. Maybe we pick 3 sites and a bunch of us try it ourselves and see what it would take. But I think we just got to be creative in the short term to kind of move this along. Tony, believe it or not, I'm going to give you the last word here, but you better be short.
Fast.
Don't go all lawyer on me.
Okay, can we get an estimate from Eagle as to what kind of manpower and budgetary improvements it would need in order to implement the recommendation?
Could we get that by next month, Abby?
Andy, it would just be a guesstimate, Tony. I don't even know where to start with that, because honestly, if we had more manpower, I would again shove it into more precautionary residential drinking water sampling first. So it's kind of a balance of how do you balance the somebody writing letters versus somebody going out and sampling res wells. Andy, do you want to take a crack at anything as far as trying to quantify what resources and funds would need?
Well, I think the 2 most promising paths we've touched on over the last few weeks are, one, looking at what we're spending on. I think you did an estimate, Abby, for Capital City Airport or something like that. So looking at, what we're spending doing what we're doing now, and then, Tony mentioned, a pilot would be the other opportunity to put real cost estimates on it. So I think, those are 2 ways of getting an idea. I mean, I think you're right that a theoretical exercise of what it costs is very difficult,
So could we pick 2 of those sites and do a pilot of just a letter campaign? We're opening an investigation a mile from your area and see what it took for manpower.
I mean, we can certainly start walking through the exercise. I don't know. I don't have people to send out 1,000 letters or, so I can't commit to that part of it, but yeah, we can walk through the exercise of what it would take.
Well, if we got people to walk through the exercise, maybe they could be licking stamps and sending out letters while they're doing it. I mean, I'm just trying to be creative here, like it takes manpower to walk through an exercise too. So like, let's just do it while we're walking through the exercise.
Okay. Let's start with that and see where we go. I can't volunteer the project staff that are actually out doing the investigation, but we can start with MPART here and start walking through the exercise.
Maybe what we can do is, I don't know, but try to come up with, if we take a case study, or a pilot, a real scenario, and sort of approach it like we're going to do it, and answer all the questions about how we'd get it done, and see what that looks like. Just keep working that until we either determine that amount of money or hit a brick wall and then figure out how to get around it.
All right, Dave, you got 60 seconds.
Okay, maybe another solution to the manpower is temporary resources. Temporary, the state uses subcontractors all the time. So why wouldn't, for a pilot program, if there's budget money in order to bring a subcontractor or temporary services, like Sandy said, just to mail a letter, it doesn't take a scientist to do that. So thank you.
Yeah, I will throw out that I wonder whether or not the letter is the best method of reaching people. If we're going to actually be effective in communication, is the letter, that's one of my big questions, is really the letter the best way to do it?
Right, so I guess we can continue that conversation next month because we're at the top of the hour and it's 70 degrees. We have about 36 minutes left at sunshine. So, all right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Andy.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.